Hey everyone, welcome to the new episode of the Rabbito podcast. Today I'm super excited to have here Ethan Evans, which has been sharing a lot of insights with me personally, but especially with his LinkedIn network about becoming an executive, improving your career, and really driving teams forward. All of these suggestions and topics are coming from his experience, 15 years at Amazon, and many years before that also as an executive. So I think this episode is really going to help all the founders that are transitioning into more executive roles as their company grows, but also all the employees that really want to step up in their career. So Ethan, thank you so much for being here.
It's my pleasure, and I really enjoy the opportunity to share with people how to grow in their careers. And of course, I've enjoyed watching your career evolve over several years of our relationship.
Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate it. I think most of the advices that I keep coming back to in my career, I actually heard from you. So that's pretty interesting. I mentioned executive a few times during the intro, so maybe we could start from there. How would you explain to a 5-year-old or to a junior employee what an executive actually is, what it means, what is the difference between a manager and executive? How do you define it?
Yeah, I would say the difference between a manager and an executive is focused on setting direction for the company. They're operating at a whole company level, and they're trying to figure out how to make the entire company successful. Even if they only lead a function, they're the vice president of engineering or of marketing. Their goal is the success of the entire company, and that's the scope of their thought. Also, the length of their thought is often multiple years. In other words, maybe we're doing fine this year, or maybe we're doing poorly this year, but I have to be thinking about our long-term horizon. A manager is worried about today, tomorrow, the short term, the projects. They're focused on getting things done and organizing their team to deliver a particular goal. They may or may not, depending on the size of the company, fully understand where that goal plays in to the bigger strategy. And so that I think is the difference is the outlook. I think of managers as looking down towards their teams and trying to figure out how to get that team to perform well and hit its goals. Whereas an executive is looking out across the company and out across the market and sort of trying to steer the ship, if you will, to get it to port.
Yeah, that's an interesting way of putting it. And I think a lot of people listening to this will probably be founders or want to be founders or were founders at some point. That's probably a role that mixes pretty well these two things, because you need to have the vision for the company, you need to see where it's going, where the market is going, but you also need to lead your team. And so all the motivational aspect and really day-to-day part of it comes into play. What would you say is the most common mistake that people do transitioning from maybe a management approach or like from a manager role to a more executive type of role? Is there any common issue that you see?
Yeah, I think there's a famous book on this, which captures in its title the problem, and it's called What Got You Here Won't Get You There. It's written by a guy named Marshall Goldsmith. But basically, when people move between levels, they tend to bring the behavior that made them successful at the previous level. And for founders end up having to operate at multiple levels, but also if their company succeeds and grows, they have to change their level and change what they're doing. So, for example, a so-called solopreneur has to do most of the work themselves, and then they have to learn to delegate it, and then they have to learn to like have managers and have them have teams, and this goes on and on. Well, the biggest mistake I see is people think that going to the next level just means doing what they've been doing, but doing somehow more of it and not changing to do something new or different. And so I talked about how executives have to think about the strategy and think longer term. There's still, of course, a lot of pressure to execute, right? If you're a sales executive, you're still expected to meet quarterly numbers. But you also have to be thinking about the sales strategy and building out the sales organization and things that are going to be multi-year. And if you only think, oh, I'm just a bigger salesperson, I just have to keep hitting quarterly numbers, you won't add those other activities.
Mhm.
And so the biggest mistake is not realizing the new activities you have to add. And what comes with that is realizing what former activities you have to stop.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very hard for people to stop those activities. That's why that book is called What Got You Here Won't Get You There. I'm really good at whatever I was just doing. I'm so good at it that it's why you're choosing to move me up or promote me. And therefore, I'm really comfortable with it. And so I want to keep doing the thing that's made me successful. And it's a trap. So
It's hard to
that's the
get out
big
of
thing.
the comfort zone. Yeah, I guess
Yeah.
that.
To give up what's made me successful so far.
Yeah, I think there is another book that you suggested. You suggested me a while ago, which was First 90 Days. I don't remember if it was you, but I
Yeah.
guess it's a
First
pretty.
90 days also. Yes.
And I see in that book he brings a few examples of people doing even lateral moves, but having the same approach, and explains how that failed multiple times for multiple people.
Yeah.
Because it's the same thing, right? Different context, could be different company, could be different role, but you cannot expect to replicate the same playbook and have the same results. So yeah, going to a higher level of abstraction then, but still trying to give something somewhat practical. Is there any question or mindset or framework that you think people should follow, or at least should think about when moving into a more executive type of role? So just to bring an example, you know very well David Nash, and I remember watching one of his videos some years ago talking about the questions that he asked himself to understand how to bring a company or his job to the next level. So he would ask himself, like, what are the Tim Ferriss type of questions, right? What are the 20% of things that I'm doing that are bringing most of the results? Yada, yada, yada. So do you have anything like that you think people should think about?
That's a really good question. I don't know if I have like a set level of questions you think about when becoming an executive. You did mention the book First 90 Days, which is an excellent book on starting any new position, but particularly a leadership position. It's the best book I know of on that topic. But to answer your question directly, I think the biggest question is to try and figure out what goals are you trying to hit. Executives have to understand what are they trying to accomplish. I think at every other level, there's other people you can ask. But as with the founder, executives are often as autonomous as founders. They may have a CEO. The CEO may be in another country. The CEO may be very busy. The CEO may not know your area. And so with a executive, you sort of have to come up with your own goals. You could call it synthesize the goals of what is it that is important for your role to deliver. As an example, maybe I'll tell a story. There was one year where I was an executive and we set a bunch of goals for my business, and all of those goals were hard. They were going to take a lot of work, and they did take a lot of work. But towards the end of the year, I realized that while we were going to hit all the goals, we weren't going to fundamentally transform the business from a failing business into a succeeding business, because we hadn't changed the underlying root cause of why the business was struggling. We had just made all the metrics 20% better, which was nice. So in essence, we had chosen the wrong goals. We had chosen incremental goals when I needed to have chosen a transformational goal.
Mm-hmm.
Now, whether or not I would have succeeded is a separate question, but I definitely didn't succeed by just, even though on paper I could say like, oh, we set 10 goals and I hit all 10.
Yeah.
Yes, but it didn't make a difference. And so I think executives have to ask the right question of what really matters, what is going to make the business successful. And it's very easy to confuse being active and being busy from doing something worthwhile. That, I guess, would be my main point.
Yeah, I think this also goes back to the first 90 days book, or what you were saying at the beginning. Sometimes it's really important to clean your brain and really forgetting of what you've been doing before, because it allows you to go start back from zero and really understands the fundamental things you need to do. In this example, this is not financial advice, guys, but if your goal is becoming Elon Musk, as much as you want to, and the right thing to do usually is invest in ETFs and like just save up your money. The truth is that the most likely scenario to get there is to do something incredibly reckless that you shouldn't do again, because also it shouldn't be your goal to become as rich as Elon Musk probably. But yeah, only by stepping back and really thinking, what does the business need, you get to the type of lateral thinking and different type of answers. So
I come from computer science and robotics, in particular artificial intelligence, and one of the flaws they quickly realize is if you ask a computer to get to the moon, one thing it may propose is climb a tree or climb a mountain, because that puts you closer. But that doesn't obviously get you anywhere. It's the wrong approach. And this is the same thing with ETFs and wanting to be incredibly rich. Is it a good step that theoretically takes you closer? Sure, but it's a dead end, because now you're just on a mountain with nowhere else to go, and
you need someone crazy to say, you know what, let's build a rocket ship with fuel that could explode at any moment and just ship it there,
light the bottom on fire. Yeah. And that's exactly what I was talking about. When I failed in this executive role at Amazon, I hit all my goals. I set a goal to get 1,000 feet closer to the moon, and I climbed a hill, but that wasn't actually useful. And so that's the mistake of setting the wrong goals.
Yeah. So I would say definitely that's priority number one, making sure that your strategy is sound and you pick the right points to get to, and then decide how to get there.
Yeah.
And what would you say are the challenges that you face in your career working with either a CEO, or I guess in Amazon, you probably had a few other levels, right, between you and the CEO. But what are common mistakes you see? Because I guess that must be a tough relationship, right? You need to gain trust, and then you need to maintain it, and you need to make sure that that the lack of trust that could be generated doesn't impact your team. So how do you manage that?
Yeah, it's a good question. So much of so much relationship comes into play because everything at that level is debatable. You'd love to think it's all factual, but the questions being asked are almost always highly debatable and not provable. And therefore, they also are stylistic. So we've been using Musk as an example. You could look at how he's running Twitter, or decisions he's made at Twitter, or for that matter, decisions at SpaceX, wherever you want. They're all debatable. Should we build this rocket or not? That. Do we need a faster launch schedule? Do we need more? These questions don't have 1 + 1 = 2, not 3 sort of clear answers. So what comes out of that is you have to build a relationship with the leaders above and around you, where somehow you can come to consensus or come to decisions where no one is going to be provably right. So maybe a story will help here. Jeff Bezos had a very close aide named Jeff Wilke, who ran the American retail business, when they decided to go into the Kindle business. So Jeff had come up with the idea of making an e-reader device and selling ebooks. And Jeff Wilke, who was his right-hand man, said, why are we making hardware? We don't know anything about making hardware, and it's very hard. And they argued about it. And Jeff Wilke, eventually said, look, if we succeed in doing this, it's going to cost more than we think, and it's going to take longer than we think. And it's going to be a very expensive, difficult proposition. And Jeff Bezos said, well, okay, that may be true. But number one, I'm asking you to trust me and go on this journey. So he asked his lieutenant, I understand you disagree. Now, will you help me anyway? This is a key thing. And number two, understand that if we succeed, we'll not only have a valuable business, we'll have learned how to do a new thing, which is build hardware. And so it's worth it. Well, the moral of the story is it did take longer than they thought, and it did cost more than they thought, and it was still the right decision. And Jeff Wilke tells this story. You can go look it up. And he basically says, I was wrong. I was right about it taking longer, even longer than I thought. And I was right about it costing more, even more than I feared. And yet it was still right because we ended up with this great product and we ended up with a hardware division that now has built Fire TV and satellites and robots and whatever. So the executive relationship there is, how do you get to a point where your executive team will support you and join you in a challenge, even if they don't agree with you, and even if they think it's going to be a disaster, because you need everybody. The saying is, a house divided against itself cannot stand. How do you get everyone to work together even when they can't? No one can be proven right or wrong until later.
Yeah, I would say this is the step before the Sam Altman standard that we witnessed recently, where, you know, if you get fired, is your company gonna quit altogether to follow you?
Right.
But that's probably a pretty good standard. And the truth is that a lot of those decisions that you take at that level have extremely non-linear returns, right? So probably at some point it's very important to challenge ideas and to challenge initiative, but as you said, there is no right or wrong answer, and the time you're gonna be spend that you will spend debating as an organization all of these big ideas into the smallest of detail is gonna slow down tremendously any type of development, I guess. So that's also something to keep in mind.
Yeah, Bezos has another rule. I cite him a lot, obviously, because I worked at Amazon and he was hugely successful. There's a leadership principle that says, called bias for action, but he's written about it in his letters to shareholders. And he says speed matters in business. And his point is, he says, lots of large companies are good at making correct decisions, but they make them too slowly. And the tricky thing is to make good decisions also quickly. And he talks about how you basically have to make them before you have all the answers you want. You have to take some risk and guess.
Mhm.
And people fear, nobody likes to be wrong. And nobody really likes to be wrong when there's like lots of money on the line and lots of public exposure. If you're an executive at a company, at a big enough company, and we did just see this with Sam Altman, and if you're at a big company and you make a decision and it's wrong, everybody's going to write about it. So like all the people on the board that removed Sam, they're now all infamous, right? They will, for years, they will be the idiots who tried to fire Sam Altman. Whether or not they are idiots and whether or not that's fair and whatever, whole separate thing. Like the point is, it's hard to take high risk decisions, it's even harder to take high risk decisions when the New York Times is going to like put a front page article about how dumb you are. And some people seem to be immune to this, right? Like Musk is your example of, he just seems to revel in like, oh, people think I'm dumb. This is great.
That's his main KPI, I think. Like how many people call him
Yeah.
stupid on.
But very few people have that level of sort of imperviousness to criticism. And so, and that has its own, that leads to hubris, you know, it's got its own problems.
Yeah, of course. I think we already mentioned quite a few things that executives can get wrong. So to try and close the circle, is there anything else that you think we should mention? Like especially thinking about maybe, again, founders that see their organization grow and need to step into that type of visionary role or like on a full-time basis. Any other mistake that you think people should be aware of so that they are less likely to fall into it, even though they probably need to hit their head against the wall a few times before they understand it completely?
Well, I'm going to reinterpret your question a little bit to answer the one I thought you were asking, which I think is more fun, which is what can executives do right?
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
and I guess the way to frame that as a mistake is you can't be afraid of the role. You can't be paralyzed by the possibility that a lot of founders have a little bit of success and then they become overly protective of what they
Mhm.
have. And that slows them down from uh, getting to the next level because there's so much comfort and like, oh my God, we're making payroll and whatever. Um, and the boldness goes away. And and so how you can succeed is continuing to lead with confidence, continuing to follow your vision, to stick to your vision, and to have that clear vision of what you're trying to do. And I think for a founder, the other piece that is a mistake is not hiring the people in around you to complement you. No one is perfect. When I look at most of the great founders that we all talk about, like I mentioned, Bezos had this guy, Jeff Wilke, and I could go through other members of the management team. But we know Bill Gates had Paul Allen, and Steve Jobs first had Steve Wozniak, and then he had this whole collection of people, Johnny Ives, and a whole set of people, Tim Cook, who everyone knew Steve Jobs, but there was this cast of really strong people that made Apple work under Steve Jobs. And I think that's part of the executive role that gets forgotten, which is the executive in the end is only as strong as their team. Um, an executive alone is kind of useless, right?
Mhm.
They have to have a team. And so having that right team is both the opportunity and the potential mistake.
Yeah, no, definitely. And actually, you started walking into my next question, which is, what is on the flip side? What is that more junior members of the team or mid-level team members often don't understand about what is happening up there? How do you like to bridge the gap in that case? So I just joined the company. I have a few years of experience, and I see those suits making decisions about what's going to happen. How do you make sure that everyone is involved and feels like they are working towards the same goal? Do you have any suggestions there?
Yeah. So, as you know, since you and I have worked together, I always talk about books that help people understand. And
Yeah.
the expert on this is a guy named Simon Sinek. He has a 10-minute TED talk called Start with Why for people who don't want to read a whole book. And then he has a book, Start with Why, and then several other books. Uh, but his point was you have to help people understand the why. Leaders fall into, well, I just need to tell you what to do. Uh, and really micromanaging leaders go even further and they tell you how to do it. I need you to do exactly
Mhm.
this. Well, A, that's not inspiring. And B, you may tell me to dig a ditch, but if I don't know why I'm digging the ditch, I may dig it wrong. I may not understand. No, this ditch is, what is this ditch for? Is it a trench to defend us from attack? Is it a ditch to drain water away? Are we going to plant food in it? Like, is it a foundation for a building? If you just tell me dig a ditch, I have no idea what I'm doing. If you tell me why I'm digging, then I can make intelligent decisions about it. And so that idea of start with why, it's really important that executives try to share the why. And that also gives the people, the lower level employees, the junior employees, as you called them, the opportunity to give information. Because um, sometimes the problem you run into, something I may think is a problem with the plan may not be a problem if I understand the why. On the other hand, something you may not be aware of may be a huge problem.
Mhm.
Like, hey, you've asked me to dig a ditch. Did you know there's a road there? Oh no, I
Yeah.
didn't. That's a problem, right? Like, um, and so uh, encouraging that clear communication. It's an overhead, but as you have a look, the problem with organizations, the bigger they are, the more the overhead, the less efficiency. This is hard to get away from. Um, automated communication, modern tools that we're all familiar with, whether it's Slack or whatever, are how we try to fight that. But you have to try and have these, you're trying to get a situation where everyone understands the mission and the goals and can flow information up and down appropriately. And yet, with more and more people, that's harder and harder because the human brain can only process so much. You're trying to fight how to do that well. I realize I've sort of wandered around the question you ask, but I think it does come back to trying to give everyone in the company a sense of where we're going and what the ultimate goal is. Because if you understand the goal, you can take action on your own. If you understand we're digging for a foundation of a house versus we're digging a defensive trench, then you can make your own decisions about what to do when you come to a rock, right? Because in some cases, you're going to need to move the rock. And in some cases, the rock is an asset.
Yeah, that's a very good point, and definitely something to keep in mind. I mean, you mentioned tools. I think sometimes you even get lost in all the tooling possibilities that exist nowadays. I've seen very efficiently work just an email that someone could be the CEO in a smaller company or could be the executive of your team just sends and say, hey, by the way, this week, this is what's on my mind, and or like this month, this is why we're doing this is where we're going, this is the debate that we had as our executive team and where we decided to go and why. I really think that it also helps probably the person writing the email, following a bit the Feynman technique, no, to explain and dumb down in a way what was decided at a higher level to understand if the reasoning is sound. So,
well, you asked me to explain to a 5-year-old, what an executive does, and I said, well, they look at the big picture, roughly. They look at the whole company. There is a real value in if you can't explain it in a tweet at some level, or you can't explain it simply, then you don't know yourself. Or there's an awful lot of complexity in the strategy. The more complicated things are, the more, they can go wrong. Like, I mentioned the Kindle. Everyone kind of knows what a Kindle e-reader is. Bezos had a really clear vision for it, which he said, we're going to get to where we have every book ever written in any language available in 60 seconds. That was like a North Star that now, maybe 15 years later, the world is close to achieving. Like probably almost, it would be weird now for a book not to have an ebook version. And lots of older books have been made into ebooks, and it works in lots of languages. So that's now kind of finally true. But that was a North Star that everyone could work towards. And you see really good companies set these. Federal Express, or if you want to think of it outside the US as DHL is a better analogy, but Federal Express used to have a saying, which is, to get the customer's package there the very next day, regardless. And the word regardless was the important word because it meant the customer doesn't really care what problems we have. They're paying us to get it to where it's going overnight. And it either does or it doesn't. It's very binary. And so as a leader, you could understand, and as a worker, you can understand, am I getting the package there in time or not? I'm either winning or losing. It made the whole complex planes and trucks and everything incredibly simple. Get it there overnight, win, don't fail.
Yeah, turning these things into one and zeros, I think it's extremely important for efficiency in the team, right? Because it makes it clear, simple. You need to make a decision on what you're going to do next. And you can base your answer based on that framework, on that main North Star that you have. I think it's really important to streamline and align the team. And that's something that I've seen a lot of startups get wrong as well. This is a bit of a personal rant, but like everyone talks about OKRs, but then OKRs become just the key result part when the objective part is actually arguably more important sometimes.
Absolutely. This is my point. You're measuring I'm interrupting your rant because I want to rant with you. This was my failing, which is that I talked about, which was the year that I hit all these key results, but I had the wrong objective.
Yeah.
And yeah, moving a bunch of numbers, if they're the wrong numbers, is not value. Please keep ranting. I didn't want to cut you off.
No, I think you said it. You said it well. Way better than I could. But I like to before we move into the career development part of this talk, to ask a question that I ask pretty much everyone, which is, which books would you suggest on the topic? And I know that with you, I'm hitting like a gold mine, because I probably have, like, here in the back in my office, I probably have 4 or 5 books that were suggested by you. I have more home. So yeah, what would you say are like important books to read if you want to get better as an executive, or if you're planning to get there with your career, or if you're an employee and you just want to understand better how executive thinks or a manager thinks?
Yeah, well, I said the canonical book in this space, like the Bible in a sense, is that what got you here won't get you there. It's about getting to executive. First 90 days is about taking on new positions. I think the other book that's incredible here about learning, okay, technical people often don't like to hear this, but I just got off a call. As you probably know, I'm an executive coach. And I just got off a call where I was coaching a principal engineer, and I was laughing with him because every problem he brought me was what a lot of people would call political or relational. Mm-hmm. He was struggling to work with a PM and struggling to work with another manager. And how do I get this manager to do this? And how do I get this PM to work with me that way? 2 books. The first thing you have to understand, though, is if you want to be in leadership, it's not going to be driven off your technical brilliance. That's going to help, but it's going to be driven off your ability to work with people. So that's all emotional intelligence. And the 2 books for that are, number 1, Leadership and Self-Deception. It's by a group called the Arbinger Institute, and Leadership and Self-Deception is all about how to see and treat other people as people, not as objects. So if you listen or even replayed the language I just used, I said, how do I get that PM to do that? I'm trying to get the PM, I'm treating them as a API. How do I yank their levers so that they'll produce the output I want, not as a person? And so a better question is, how can I work with the PM so they want to help, right? That's a human question. What does the PM need from me in order to succeed? That's changing your mindset. And that's this leadership and self-deception.
This is new for me as well, actually. So I'm gonna.
Okay, well, yeah. So this is my number 1 book on leadership. Is that book? Mm-hmm. The other book is a very old book comparatively, and very famous, much more famous than Leadership and Self-Deception. And that book is Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. Mm-hmm. 2 things about this book. First, the title used to put me off. Like, it sounds manipulative. Oh, how to win friends and influence people. It's like about schmoozing, to use the English word. It's not really about that, though. It's very much about how to build relationship. And this guy, Carnegie, was not educated in it, but he was brilliant in understanding human nature. And so he's incredibly deep on how do people think and react. And he was just incredibly smart about how to work with people. The other thing you have to know about the book is I think there's updated versions where they've gone through and edited the language. But if you get the original version, which is free online, be aware that it was written in 1937, I think, and he talks in terms of businessmen and housewives. Okay. So you just have to understand it was written 85 years ago and the world was different. And don't throw it out the window because, yes, he reads like a chauvinist pig because he talks about like how to please your wife and how to, it's written from a different era.
Okay.
Yeah. Doesn't change the quality of the advice.
Yeah. All right. Makes sense. I also have 2 more books that I discovered thanks to you. One is a pretty simple one, but I think I like it also because it's pretty simple. It's pretty straightforward, which is the 1 Minute Manager. So less executive type of role, but still very helpful. Another one is the effective executive. I think that is the
That's
correct
Peter
name.
Drucker. Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't recommend that to you, but it's an excellent, well-known book for sure. It's
Yeah.
it's sort of not in my go-to
Go to.
canon, but arguably it very much could be. The 1 Minute Manager, if someone's trying to figure out how to basically be a good manager, that's probably the simplest book that can be read in an hour that
Yeah.
will take you, if not from 0 to 1, at least like from 0 to 1/2 in an
Yeah.
hour.
Yeah, definitely.
Uh,
It's so powerful to see what happens when writers don't feel the need of filling blank pages just to justify the price of their book. I
yeah,
think that is a very powerful thing with that book. It gets straight to the point a lot
I
of
often
times.
admire books that can be shorter.
Yeah,
And of course, you may know, Sam Clemens, Mark Twain famously wrote, "If I'd had more time, this would have been shorter."
yeah,
Right?
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And if people want to read about one of your stories that you mentioned as well on your LinkedIn a few times, they can also get Working Backwards, right, which is a book on Amazon leadership principles and how Amazon operated. So I think that's also an interesting insight in a company that arguably did decently well at managing and scaling big teams. So that's another one that I think it's definitely worth reading.
Yeah, so I'll tell everybody a quick story about Working Backwards. It was written by one of my former managers, which is why I'm in the book, not in a flattering way. I'm in there, having a problem. And one of Jeff Bezos' close advisors at the company. But I've talked to the author, who's a friend of mine, a few times since he wrote it. And even though the title is very good, Working Backwards, and it talks about Amazon's method of working backwards from the customer, he now feels that he picked the wrong title. And the real title that might appeal to people even more, and I do think it's brilliant, is he should have called the book The Invention Machine. Because what Jeff Bezos was trying to do was create a company that would relentlessly invent new things and that would systematically invent and invent and invent. And if you look at Amazon, of course, you could argue they invented or perfected e-commerce. They certainly invented at some level fast shipping as a business model. And then they invented the Kindle. They invented AWS and cloud computing. Some people may dispute some of these claims, but they set out to build a machine that just cranked out innovation. And you may or may not care to read about Amazon's business methods, but if you want to know how they systematically tried to create a company that would out invent everyone else, I think that actually is the better, like, oh my God, get me that book. And I think it's got some truth to it. So.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, he's still in time to publish it again, just a different name.
Yeah, right. Version 2, the invention machine.
Version two,
Or
exactly.
I'll have to ask him if he's going to do that. I think, yeah, writing a book was pretty painful. So I don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
Because they
It's a
had to
very
write it. They
painful process.
chose, well, interesting choice, right? Neither of the authors worked at Amazon anymore. So they had the choice to write it without Amazon's approval.
Mm-hmm.
But they wanted to write it with Jeff's approval. And like that was tricky because does Jeff want them to write a book that tells everyone his secrets? But ultimately he did and was very supportive.
Yeah, I feel like at some point you reach a scale where that is not your moat anymore, and also the truth is that playbook, it's so hard to replicate when you reach Amazon scale, that someone that is good enough to make it actionable probably would have made it happen anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely it's going to help a lot of people. So that's
Yeah, their goal was to place Amazon, whether it deserves it or not, you can decide, but to place Amazon in the like long-term corporate lineup of models people study. So Toyota for Lean Six Sigma. They wanted to like permanently place Amazon in the category of like future leaders when they go to business school will study these great companies and Amazon will be one of them. That was their goal.
Yeah. Yeah, I think they'll succeed. And moving towards the another part of the way you work with people. So you said you're an executive coach, but you also help a lot of people in their career if they're not executives, if they just want
Yep.
to grow, but even I guess if they just want to have a better career and stay in the type of role that they have.
Yep.
So mixing a bit these two topics, how do you think a company can successfully foster a good career development culture? Did you see any best practices there that you think most people should consider? I feel like a lot of times founders and organization can see that a bit of as antagonistic. Maybe that's not the right word, but you feel like I am helping people getting better salaries and growing in their career. Um, so yeah, what did you see? What did you see there? What you think works?
Well, this starts with a fundamental belief. It starts with the fundamental belief of either scarcity or plenty. So, sorry for the academic diversion, but the scarcity mentality says a dollar for you is a dollar I don't have. And the plenty mentality says, how can we both make more dollars together? And if you're going to invest in people's careers as a leader, you have to believe, yes, I'm going to pay them more, but I'm going to get even more. Like we're all going to get better together. And this is why a lot of startups use stock, right? The
Mm-hmm.
idea is, oh, I'm not going to pay you in money directly. I'm going to pay you in equity. And that way, when the company does better, we both do better together. And that's actually a very powerful idea. There's just the problem that I can't eat equity or pay rent with equity today. And so we have to use some money. But in an ideal world, you and I would work together only on equity,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like in some perfect world where you didn't need to eat and you and I want to have a business, we would set it up so that 20 years from now, when we sold the business, we'd split it.
Yeah.
And then we both have perfectly aligned motivations. We might argue about how to do something, but we'd always have the same goal.
Mm-hmm.
Well, bring that back to a company. The founder has to look at it and say, by making my people better, helping them grow, I'm helping me grow. I'm helping us grow. And we're all going to win together. We're going to make the pie bigger. And so, yes, I may temporarily have to pay them more, but I'm going to get more. The other thing you have to believe is, yes, some of them will leave, and that's okay. Like some of them will grow and they'll be ready for another challenge that I don't have. And that's okay because they'll go tell the world how great I am or how great our company is. And other people will see, wow, this great person came from your company. And so you have to believe a little bit in karma that you're paying things forward.
Yeah.
And so I would say setting up that culture requires a founder with the confidence to believe in the long term. Because if you're focused on the short term, you'll never do it.
Mm-hmm.
And this is kind of true always. The more short-term focused you are, the more you're going to fail. Let me be careful with that statement. Bezos, again, had the right idea here. He said you need to be strategically patient, but tactically impatient. And this was about all kinds of things. What he meant was strategically big goals, including profiting from the growth of your people, take time and you have to be patient. But you also have to work hard towards those every day, tactically impatient. And so you have to have that faith in the long term, but each day you also have to push people. Can you do better? What do you need to learn? What are you doing better today than yesterday? And you have to hire people who want that.
Yeah.
You know, Bezos would go so far as to say, and some people won't like this, that if you have an employee on your team or as a part of your company that actually doesn't want to improve, just wants to do what they're doing and have it be the same every day, they're not the right employee. And some people say, well, that's not fair. Like, why does everybody have to get better all the time? That's business. That's,
Yeah.
we're in a growth world.
I
Stacy,
feel like it also depends on the company, right? So if you have a company with Amazon culture and that's what you want, then that becomes a fundamental part of your assessment process for new people. What I've noticed as well is that usually people tend to settle to, like, if you have a very good person and a below average person in a workplace, and maybe they work together, they're usually not gonna settle at a mid level, but the best person is gonna go down to the level of the lowest common the denominator, right? And so I guess in the case of Amazon, the necessity for growth and for innovation was so high that you are not comfortable putting that bar so low that it would risk bringing other people down. It's a strategical decision for the company in a way, I guess.
Well, you raised two good points. The first thing I want to say is a little bit on our last topic, which is just, look, I am the wrong coach, the wrong advisor for like people who work at the post office. The post office is like my classic case of like, there is no reward for doing better work. Like delivering letters faster, no one cares. All they do is maybe give you a longer route and more letters to deliver, so you get punished. And the only promotion is like if the postmaster retires or dies. So I have no idea really how to motivate people at the post office. Like, so different world, government, basically. Yeah. In this situation that you're talking about, I think it's related. I don't agree that people always fall to the lowest level, but I agree that's a risk. You actually want to set up your culture so that people who want to outperform get opportunities and rewards. And I often antagonize people when I say this, and I don't care. They can drop dead. Being fair in a workplace means giving everyone a chance to step up, but I will reward people differently. And so what you want to do is when the one person, the top performer steps up, you want to encourage them. And when the bottom performer doesn't, you don't have to quote unquote punish them, but the fact that they're not getting any rewards and they may accumulate the crappy work, I'm okay not caring about that. Now, if there's a motivation problem or something I can resolve to allow them to be a higher performer, great. I do want to do that. I'm not cruel. But fairness is about giving everyone a chance, not giving everyone the same reward. And I will totally play, oh, Ethan plays favorites. Damn right I do. My favorite people are the top performers. If you want to be a favorite, start performing. And I say this without any reservation. You want your promo clip for this podcast? It's right there, right?
I can get some clout with this.
Without reservation, I play favorites for my best people. Now, you earn that position. And it's open. I want you to earn it. This is the key that makes it human. I want you to earn it. Please do more, be more incredible, right? I want you, and I will help you. Tell me what you need. But if you don't step up when I open the door and beg you to come through it, yeah, drop dead. I'm okay with that too.
All right. Yeah, I'll set up a perfect segue for you, because I know that this is another topic you care a lot about. So the next question, I guess, is how do you get into Ethan's favorite circle? So as an employee, what do you do? How do you approach Ethan and get into his grace?
Yeah, no, it's a totally fair question, because I've admitted my grace exists and I've told you it's going to exist, and I'm unabashed about it. How do you get there? Remember, I'm trying to hit some larger goal. I have a corporate goal. I have a strategic goal. Thing number one is try to understand the goal and then figure out how to contribute to it. And so figure out how. You can ask me, what can I do to help? You can suggest, I see this thing I could do to help. I'm going to go do it. But the basic is understand that there is a goal we're trying to achieve, and I need your help to get there. And the more you can do and the more clever you can do and the more successful you are at it, the happier I'll be. And so you earn that role by solving problems, not complaining. A great manager of mine used to say, identifying a problem is worth 1 point. And he had a 10-point scale. He said there were 10 points available. Identifying a problem is worth 1 point. And then he kind of broke down like, it's worth 2 points to describe the problem and 2 points to propose a solution. And it's worth 5 points to actually implement the solution. His point was, any idiot can point out problems, right? The value is in thank you, but solve it. And so help me, like, managers do nothing but worry, right? My hair is white for a reason. And no, really, I joined Amazon with brown hair. My hair looked like yours, and now it looks like this, right? And sure, some time went by, but the stress was a big part of it. Help them not worry, solve their worries. That's how.
Yeah, and I think you have a blog post on this, right? Called
the magic loop.
The magic loop.
Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, that's something that people can go read if they want a deeper explanation. But I think, yeah, this is really the core of it. You need to make sure that you solve the problem. I think that's where most people fall off. It's like, identify the problem. You can even describe it well, but then you need to pick it up and actually get it done. And there is also a lot of trust issues that could generate from you not solving the problem that you said you were going to solve. So
of course you have to follow through. I love, I don't, hopefully, I'm sure you have listeners who natively speak a lot of different languages. I hope this language translates. But in English, on our news programs, you will hear people complaining into the camera, usually about politicians or about something in their town. And they will say the words, someone should do something. And this is like the lowest ownership thing you can possibly say, because if you unwind what they're saying, they're complaining. And, we don't have good schools. Someone should do something. We don't have, food is too expensive. Someone should do something. There are too many Airbnbs and I can't find an apartment. Someone should do something. Well, what does that always mean? Anyone but me should magically solve what I don't like. It's the lowest ownership thing. And so obviously, you've asked, how do you get my good graces? How to get on my shit list is someone should do something. Right? Like, because what you're saying is, I don't want to do anything. I just want to complain. And I don't have any ideas. I just want others to make it better. Well, that's fine if you're being interviewed and can shout into a camera and hold a sign, but that isn't work.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's also fine. I guess it's also fine as, colleague banter, or if you need to vent, that I think that's something that people need, but you're not going to do it in your one-on-one on career development with your manager. And yeah, that's probably not the right attitude. And going back just as a last point to the first question on career development, how do you think companies can practically help the employees grow into a new role or improve in their current role? So yeah, of course you can pay some lessons with Ethan Evans, or you can offer programs. What do you think is the most effective? What can you do on a culture level as a company to really make sure that that type of behavior is actually incentivized once you pass your biases of thinking short term and thinking that people will leave you because they find better opportunities?
Well, I think it begins with valuing learning. Like, you start with the idea of, does your company and your culture celebrate progress, personal progress, growth? Is that worth doing? And you have to create a culture where you say, look, yes, promotions happen, but promotions are a result of you getting better at something, and they're not directly the goal. Instead, the goal is become a better engineer or become a better manager, do something that you're great at and get better at it. You and I both share an interest in gaming. And games are developed with this idea that human motivation centers around autonomy, mastery, and purpose. So autonomy says I have some control over what I do. Like, you're not telling me how to do it. You're giving me a challenge and letting me go tackle it. Purpose is, what is the challenge? What am I trying to do? And mastery is how good I am. So games are brilliant at this, right? They start easy and the boss is small, and then the next boss battle is bigger, and the next boss battle is epic. And they step you up. You essentially set up an environment that's gamified. Maybe not formally, but that lets people feel this progress. Because why do people enjoy games? Why do they spend their time on them voluntarily? Because we like to get better. So you set up an environment where getting better is fun and rewarded and acknowledged. And then, yes, eventually you also get a new promotion or a raise. But it doesn't start with how do we give you a raise? It starts with how do we set up an environment where you can get better, that you have a mentor, that you have access to training, that you have access to harder challenges. A short story, engineers come to me all the time because I'm an engineering leader, and they complain to me and they say, oh, this work is boring. It's rote, it's repetitive. So I say to them, great, automate it. And they turn around and say, oh, well, it's really hard to automate. Interesting. So that seems like a hard problem. That's challenging. Oh, well, and of course I'm screwing them, right? I'm catching them.
Yeah.
Like, you can't both tell me it's really easy and repetitive and that you can't automate it. So, like, show me something. But there's always a way to be learning and growing, and it sucks sometimes, right? I don't like the feeling of facing a problem. I'm like, oh God, how do I solve this? But if you fight through that little bit of discomfort, there's glory on the other side.
Yeah, definitely. And just to share one last thing that you and I talked about a few times is eat the frog, right?
Yeah.
So especially first thing in the morning, if you can, just try to place in your to-do list or in your blocks in calendar, if that's what you use, the hardest thing you have to do for the day and the thing that you really don't want to do, because there is a slightly higher chance that you'll do it.
Yep.
And yeah, just try to get it done, and you can do a lot of progress by just doing that. Because the truth is that in a lot of companies and a lot of work environments, most of the work you're going to do is going to be busy work. It's
Yep.
going to be not driving results. And the things that usually make a difference are the ones that we do not want to do the hardest.
Absolutely.
So
There. You talked about Tim Ferriss and how Devin Nash respected him a lot. Tim Ferriss has a piece in his book where he quotes another leader and says that leader could judge people by how many difficult things they were willing to attempt, basically. And your tolerance for doing the hard thing that needs to be done, not the thing you're going to feel successful at. And I still struggle with this, right? Like, I've been very successful, but often I have to remind myself, like, Ethan, you preach eat the frog is here. Like,
go ahead.
and I whine like a child. I'm like, I want to eat the frog, like, but I know better. And it's still hard. It's still hard, but like, who wants a frog for breakfast, right? So if you don't know this, it's a book called Eat That Frog. It's another, I am the man of infinite book recommendations. So.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think this conversation is going to be very, very helpful, very valuable for everyone listening. So thanks a lot for your time. I like to give you a space at the end just to share where people can get more of you if they want, if they liked your rants, or where they can go and find you if they didn't like your rants as well.
Well,
yeah,
I'm open to feedback for sure. That's part of my principles. The best place to find me is on LinkedIn. Ethan Evans, I think my page is Ethan Evans VP on LinkedIn. And I'm easy to find there. You can find me through my website, ethanevans.com. And I have a Substack newsletter, which is Level Up with Ethan Evans. So those are three places to find me. I publish career advice several times a week. And I do it. Let me be clear about why I do it. I'm doing it to pay forward my good fortune. I was born on a small town on a farm in Ohio. I wasn't a poor kid. I'm not claiming that. but I've gone much further than I ever thought I would. I never imagined I would end up as an executive and end up able to retire at age 50. And so I'm trying to help other people get two things. Number one, if you want that kind of success, to let you have it, but also to eliminate career misery, people being trapped in their jobs and feeling like, why aren't I being acknowledged? Why don't I like my work? I want people to enjoy their work and to be successful at it. So I'm trying to make that possible. And hopefully I can do that for some of the people who follow me.
All right, great. Thank you so much for being here. And yeah, hopefully we'll have you back eventually
All
also in
right.
another episode.
Well, it's my pleasure. See you soon in either Portugal or Italy.
Yeah, for sure.